Hi everybody. Hi everybody, and welcome to the Not So Funny Animal Comics panel. I'm Dan Naylor. I am co-director of MICE and introducing the panel for you, including the moderator. I just want to say I was the one who came up with the title of this panel, Not So Funny Animal Comics, and several of the panelists said, mine are funny. And I realized it probably should have been not necessarily funny. They're actually pretty funny. So thank you for coming. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank our panelists, Karl, Brandon, Maria, and John, and moderator Kat. And I also want to thank our new host here, Boston University. This is MICE's 13th year, but our first year in BU. Not coincidentally, it is also the first year that BU is offering a visual narrative graduate degree program. Wow. Visual narrative is what you have to call comics if you want to run the graduate degree program then. And it's being run by Joel Gill, who's a great cartoonist and educator, and is here today again. So if you think you'd be interested in a program like that, please check it out. Also, MICE is produced by the Boston Comics Art Foundation, a 501c3 charitable organization. We put on shows like this and educational programs in comics and support individual artists. If you like what we're doing and the sound of that, please consider donating to DCAT. You can ask at the welcome desk or look on the MICE website for information on that. And if you're not interested in donating but want to be part of MICE, please consider volunteering next year. We always love to have more people involved, and it's a lot of fun. So now, without further ado, I will introduce the moderator, who will then introduce the rest of the gang. Toyoshima is the creator and illustrator of Secret Asian Man, a strip dedicated to exploring the frustrations, successes, and hypocrisies of race relations in America. In 2007, Secret Asian Man became the first nationally syndicated comic strip that featured an Asian American lead character. Take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so first off, thanks for coming. Before we dive into these wonderful people, I just kind of want to give you guys kind of a brief history of what's going on with animals in comics. And I'm just going to start off with what could possibly be maybe the very first anthropomorphic character created by James Swinnerton. Anybody heard of him? Swinnerton fans? No? So the very first thing he did, and he got his first job when he was like 17 years old, was called The Little Bears. And he got kind of bored of it real quick, and he started making this other character named Mr. Jack, who is, you know, as the title says, kind of a naughty character. He was married, went around, but liked to flirt with every single lady he met, and that's kind of the storyline. Like a W.C. Fields, kind of old school, kind of maybe borderline misogynist. So that's what, you know, so the very first comics, while it started as kind of like a kids type thing, started turning into more adult fare, and they moved it from the kids section to the sports section, because, you know, the men read sports. So, and this was, you know, 1892, right? Super early. Jack came a few years later, and then followed up, it started to kind of evolve. George Harriman, who's, you know, Krazy Kat, maybe some of you guys a little bit more aware of Krazy Kat, but, you know, 1913, still pretty early, you know, wide variety of subject matters like getting hit with a brick in the field, or getting hit with a brick in the desert.
That was every strip.
Or getting hit with a brick out of a window. So, you know, and the mouse, Ignatz, is there's actually a ward named after him, so while people make fun of it sometimes, he's definitely in a place of honor. But it started entering kind of a slapstick type element into you know, animal comics. Soon after that, Felix the Cat, you know, we're starting to get a little, not that 1919 is modern, but I feel like everybody's seen the clock with the eyes that go back and forth. Felix the Cat, Pat Sullivan, and Otto Messmer. You know, and same thing, this is a comic strip, very kid-friendly, at this point, animation is almost becoming hand in hand with comics. So now we're seeing cartoons and things like that. Definitely kid-centric, child themes, things of that nature, not edgy like at all. And of course, Mickey Mouse, right? 1930 was the first comic strip appearance of Mickey Mouse. A couple years earlier was, the Steamboat Willie animation. So this became a comic, and it was written by Walt Disney, but then illustrated by Ub Iwerks, who's an amazing artist. And of course, Disney, as the years went on, led to the things like Looney Tunes and Hanna-Barbera, and suddenly entire cast of animals were being kind of exposed to people. But again, kind of a kid, funny, slapstick, Tom and Jerry, Itchy and Scratchy, it goes all the way through. And this is kind of the predecessor for that. So, that kind of, and internationally, I'm just going to throw in one that I grew up with and love. It's called What's Michael? And it's basically, a cat, the life of a cat.
Yeah, I did not rip it off, I swear to God.
And it was basically observations of, of a cat's life, and it was just, hardly any words, and it was just a really good thing. But just to show the fact that, it's not like animal comics are specific to this country or anything. There's just a worldwide, almost universal fascination with doing that. But then, so that kind of brings us to today, right? So we got these guys up here, so now I'm going to introduce these guys. So first we have, left to right, Karl Stevens. Next to him, Brandon Berry. Maria Hoey. And John Allen. All right, so, just in continuing kind of the tradition of, animals in comics and how far it's gone, certainly there are comedy elements to these guys too. It's not just the, the not so funny part isn't meant to be literal. But just to have them go through kind of their books right now, if we can start with Karl, we'll just kind of work our way down. Karl, if you can tell us about your book Penny, specifically.
Sure.
And then kind of let us know how you came to that story. And yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Talk. It's great to see you guys. Penny started as a weekly comic strip for this newspaper in New York called The Village Voice, which doesn't exist anymore, fortunately. It started as, well, I was approached by them to develop a comic strip, and they wanted something very broad. So I was talking with my wife about what would be a broad topic, and she said, write something about our cats. So I chose one of the cats, Penny, and I guess the aesthetic I was going for was Garfield, but in my style, which is a very naturalistic, old master drawing influence style. So I thought that would be funny to draw it like that, but have her have all these, sort of gag cartoons, but style thoughts. But actually, it's not really like Garfield the more I think about it. It's, it's I was trying to imagine what it was like for her to be living in our tiny 900 square foot apartment, just being an indoor cat and what that must feel like, it must be like prison or something, and you're just kind of counting the days, or you're just so much inside of your head. But actually, now that I'm saying that, I think really it comes from, at the time I was working as a museum guard at the Isabella Stewart Garden Museum. And, that felt like a prison. And I was walking around this interior for 8 hours a day, completely inside my head. So, really, Penny is, I guess, a transcription of my crazy thoughts that I was having, and I just drew her saying them instead. So I could get away with all my sophomoric, idiotic thoughts if I just put them on a cat. Because if it had been me, people would just think I was a pretentious dickhead. So really that's, but then, so The Voice, so I did it for 6 months, and they paid really well. I was getting $1,000 a page, which is insane.
Wow.
And I think they realized that they were paying the cartoonists too much. because they quickly went out of business like 3 months later.
This is your fault.
This is my fault. So then I approached my agent about doing the book, and she's like, of course, this is gonna sell really, easily. So we sold it to Chronicle, and then I ended up doing 120 more similar strips, and then the book came out last year. And in a weird note, David Sedaris, who was a writer, a famous writer, is a fan, and is now like promoting it on his tour. So,
Wow.
but Chronicle didn't. So they like knew about it back in the spring. I'm gonna rant real quick, but they they only had 500 copies on hand, but they didn't tell me that. And Sedaris has been selling 100 copies a night, and he just started the tour. So I think it's my one shot at commercial success, and it's being
That's awesome.
ripped away from me by my publisher.
That's great.
I know, I'm psyched. Everyone feel bad for me, but don't feel bad for me.
But you're not a cat.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Brandon Barry, I've got images of 3 of your issues up here. If you can tell us about your book, Cat, and kind of how you came to that.
Sure. So thank you for having me. Thanks everyone for coming. So Cat was inspired by mainly Saturday morning cartoons like Thundercats, Transformers, SWAT Cats, just all of the classic cartoons, mainly, where I got mainly inspiration. Some old comic strips such as Krazy Kat was a big one. And I wanted to do anthropomorphic characters because something about designing them is a lot more fun for me than drawing human faces. So I get to bring the graphic elements to the character designs a lot easier than I would with humans. So the story is basically the Cat is an intergalactic cat burglar who's an actual cat who's being chased by a detective who's an actual hound dog. And so he's chasing him through space on his latest job. And it's really just like a sci-fi action comic where I'm taking all my biggest inspirations from comics and films like Stalker by Andrew Tarkovsky and all different types of inspirations and throwing them into this series. So it's got a little bit of comedy, a little bit of action, a little bit of drama, and just some weird characters floating about having their own little adventures.
Nice. You got to have weird
That's
characters.
cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. Maria, your book, Animal Stories, if you could just kind of
Yeah,
tell us how you came to work on this, and this is with your brother, I believe?
right, so
Yeah.
my brother Peter and I work together. We've been doing comics under the name Coin-Op for a long time, like 12 years. And usually those are sort of like 10 to 16 page stories. We wanted to do a longer book, so we started thinking about, well, first of all, like how to even get to go from 16 to 184 pages. It's a big jump. And so we came up with an idea of doing 6 short stories that would be interconnected, so they could you could read them on like 2 levels. And animals was just sort of a natural subject matter for us. We both have animals, probably like everyone here. Very solitary life working as an artist, and you sort of like spend a lot of time with your animal. You start to talk like your animal. And animals are just, even from your first story you read was probably an animal story. It's like a subject matter that's very easy to approach, and we found we could put animals in lots of different genres, like a film noir. So there's a film noir cat. There's a biblical story, very Adam and Eve-ish, but instead of a snake, it's a squirrel. And so it's like, it's sort of triggering, like, oh, that's familiar to a reader, but taking it on a much stranger twist and a ride, which animals just by naturally allow you to do that because they're not humans. They can kind of do whatever they want. So that's,
No rules.
yeah, so that's kind of how animal stories, and so each one of these boxes is one of the short stories inside.
Very nice. Cool. Next, we got John Allen. I know you worked on other things too, but Jillian in Purgatory is what we got today. If you can walk us through that.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks everybody for being here. So this is a book that came out like March during the pandemic. So this is my second book with Iron Circus. So I have like this like little stable of characters that I've been drawing for a long time under the name like Ohio is for Sale. So it's this whole little universe I've been kind of iterating on, and this is just like the most recent book to come out. But yeah, I've been doing these for like 10 years. And I guess for me, when I got out of school, I started doing like serious comics, and I was like ripping off like Adrian Tomine and like Dan Clowes and stuff like this. And it just like wasn't that good. It was just like dead on the page. And at some point I just like got like kind of fed up with it. And I had been drawing these characters like since high school. And I have like a whole stack of rejection letters from like Eric Reynolds being like, nobody is ever gonna take you seriously if you draw these characters. And eventually I was just like, whatever, this is what I'm wired to do. And so I just started like drawing them, and it was, I don't know, more fun. It's like, I feel like with like human characters, you're like a little bit on the hook for like realism and just like naturalistic dialogue and stuff. And with like just like little cartoon animals, just like anything can happen. Like you're not as like, or at least I'm not as like restrained with it. But yeah, so this is the latest one. It's this dude Julian who like has like a drug problem, and he like messes up his relationship, and his girlfriend kicks him out, and then it's this whole sort of like, you know, journey into, you know, the dark night of the soul, and him having to like crawl his way back to, so.
Actually, I take issue with the realism, because I in fact do surrealism with my comics. So I don't think it's a limitation of the style. I believe it's a limitation of the imagination.
Okay, all right. Well, I have some things to learn from you.
Well, actually, that's kind of a natural transition to my first kind of posed question, which is basically like you've all, you know, for the purpose of today, you know, we just kind of picked on your animal books, but you've all worked on other books as well that don't involve animals, and there's humans and, you know, that kind of thing as other works. So when it comes to writing a story about animals versus humans, what's the difference? I mean, John, you started talking about that as far as like maybe seeing certain limitations with one or the other. But if we want to start on backwards again, I mean, have you written, you know, when you approach a human story, like those stories that you thought, you know, like the Tomine style, that kind of thing, do you go into it differently? Like, is it like...
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, yeah, I was like reading, you know, like just like Don DeLillo and just like a bunch of like, you know, post-war literature, and just like wanting to like write like serious stories. And when I started doing the like animal stuff, I justified it. I was like, oh, you know, there's this history of like Pogo and like Krazy Kat and like these like fairly respectable things within the medium. But eventually, like if I'm honest with myself, it's really just like Rocco's Modern Life and like Ren and Stimpy and just like all the, and like DuckTales and just like all the stuff I grew up with as a kid. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's like two very different modes. And so it's like a completely different like set of histories to like pull from.
Great. Maria?
Well, for us, like in animal stories, we have both humans and animals, and it's playing with the idea of like we don't truly know what animals are thinking, and in a lot of ways in our stories, it's the animals' world and humans are just in it. So they're like equal partners in the story. So I don't think for us, it wasn't different than some of our other things that are all kind of play with the absurd and magical realism. And but this allows you to just have more fun. Like we have a dog taking a shit. One person, like, yeah, I don't know, we probably wouldn't have that in our other comic. So it's kind of fun. Animals allow you to play and break down walls a lot easier.
Cool. Brandon?
Yeah, I think I don't think the story is dictated by the characters being animals or humans for me. So I would agree with what you said.
Thank you.
I think what's the challenge is the audience's expectation of the story. If it's characters that are humans as opposed to animals, I believe they have a certain expectation going into it. So like you said with the cartoon, the animals, it's easier to accept one of those characters, quote unquote, taking a shit, as opposed to a human. If we see that,
You could probably lose the quotes.
So I think it's just the audience's expectation pretty much will dictate what they're willing to accept from animals as opposed to humans.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion.
Cool. Karl?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, the way that we objectify animals is very interesting. You know, I mean, like some of us eat them and allow them to be harvested, even though it's destroying our planet. And but yet, even our like house pets, like Penny. I mean, like my wife and I just like project all of like everything onto them. So it's just like they're kind of like good vehicles for like characters, like in a way. They're like puppets. So they're sort of like an extension of like our imagination anyway. So
Right.
I feel like that's like good fodder for comedic material.
That's great. And so it's kind of scary how I'm on the same wavelength right now, because next question is basically going to be kind of about empathy. So basically the question being, do we empathize more with animals than with humans in some ways? So this is where I'm actually going to ask you guys a question. And everybody has to answer, okay? So this villain has come to town. There's a crate of humans and a crate of puppies. You can only save one, okay? Who saves the humans? Who saves the puppies? Wow, almost the same. It's almost always like, screw the humans, with the puppies. What do you guys think? I mean, as far as like empathizing, do you think there's an advantage almost to having an animal character than a human?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, of course, because they're like cute and cuddly, and I mean, like what I was saying about that, like we like project all of our emotions onto it, and it's cute, I mean, it's much easier to like an animal, like because of that.
Right, right. Agree? Same thing? You guys feeling kind of,
Yeah.
you can generally empathize more, easier, quicker.
I think so.
Well, how about this then? Next question. You guys, the villain's back, right? So now the question of empathizing between two different kinds of animals, right? So now he's back, he's got a crate of puppies and a crate of fish, all right? Like really cute fish. So like, who saves the puppies? Who saves the fish? Right, so what happened there? So suddenly the animal thing we found like a subcategory.
Wait,
of
like were they
animals.
drowning? Because like was that the
They're
question?
in there,
Because
they're like ponyo, cute, water, swimming fish.
but how are these animals dying?
See, now we're adding conditions.
I thought you
Lobster
said like
pot.
saved from drowning, so that's why I was kind of confused because
No, yeah.
fish like water.
Saved in general.
Okay, sorry.
So as far as
Thick.
your characters go, or thinking about that, Brandon, you had mentioned about like people coming in with thinking certain things. Do you think maybe going through straight through? Maybe we'll start with John this time. Do you think your stories would work as well if your characters were something like something not cuddly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think for me, one thing that I like, 'cause, I mean, like my stories aren't like super serious, but they do get into like serious subject matter, and like there's like, as much as possible, like some depth to the world and the characters. And I feel like there's like a little bit of an intentional disconnect between like the presentation of it and like what you get when you get into it. And so this may be a bad strategy, but I like the idea that it like looks like one thing, and then once you like start reading it, it kind of becomes like another thing. And I think that's like a really interesting like property of comics where you have like these two levels of the art presentation and then like the story and the writing. And I don't know, for me, like using like animal characters is like a little bit of a way to like play with that disconnect and like kind of subvert the expectation of like what the thing looks like from the outside.
Gotcha. Maria?
So for us, in our stories, the animals are always in control of what the story is. And the people are kind of catching up on in each of the stories in a different way. So that's kind of cool. Like, they're not the victim, which usually animals are.
Sure.
They're in control, and it's like, it's their world.
Yeah. Humans are observing them on their terms, basically. Yeah, yeah, gotcha. Brandon, what do you think? If it was a dog thief and a cat detective, would that, would that work?
As human, I guess technically no. But I mean, if it was just a detective, a human detective and a human cat burglar, I guess the story could still work. But for me, the visuals are just as important. So visually, I wouldn't have the same connection to it because as I design these characters, it becomes, the marks for the characters become like part of the story. So the designs for the main characters are just as important as the story itself.
Right.
So it could work, but I just wouldn't have the same passion to draw it. If I'm
Ultimately,
being
you got to
honest.
make that book, so it's got to work for you.
Or exactly. If I'm not having fun making it, then
Right.
people probably won't have fun reading it.
Right. And Karl, what if Penny were like a frog, or like a cricket?
It would be fantastic because drawing that pattern of fur, like you're trying to be Albert Durer, is not fun, let me tell you. Actually, it is. It's super fascinating. I like the lights and darks. But it's like grueling. So if like it was a frog, I mean, I'd probably put like warts and like spots all over the frog. I would have to, really tart it up. So it would take just as long.
Okay.
But as far as your question about whether it would be, I mean, again, like, it's just like my thoughts on the cat, and like that's like the gag. So it would be my thoughts on the frog, I guess. So
Specific.
it would work the same way.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, in looking at all your books, so Maria, I've got your book up right now. You have each taken kind of different ways to use animals in your stories, and you guys use them in different ways. So in animal stories, it's basically humans observing animals. The animals are animals, right? They're not wearing shirts with no pants. They don't talk, they don't do all these things. So, and that's a very kind of a specific, I'm gonna just scroll through some of these. Do you think, so the question would be, do you think that if you did give the animals a voice, like if they were actually talking and saying things and maybe telling the same story that the narrative is pushing, do you think it would be the same story? Do you think it would be?
They could talk. At our final story, he does talk. But he's a parrot. So.
Sorry. Let me back up a little bit.
No, I think for us, we really like it's that it all hinges on the human and the animal not understanding, well, the human not really understanding what's going on.
Got it.
So this is sort of like a Noah's Ark. These guys look out to the water. The water's filled with animals. And it's insane. I mean, it's not like logical. It's a crazy story. But so is Noah's Ark.
Would you put elephants in the cuddly category?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes.
Okay.
And then in the one with the dog, he's actually the president of the United States. So you kind of like, that reveals itself a few pages in, but he's Ted, the dog, but he's literally the president.
I'd say most presidents are like dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, they are being disciplined by, these horrible fossil fuel corporations.
Wow, metaphors.
So these guys are sort of grappling with what they've seen. They're guys out at sea, and they're looking out.
But meanwhile, there's one panel with
who's been
another
rescued.
animal.
He was the first animal that they saw out in the water, and they rescued him. So he's on the boat, but now they're realizing the sea is filled with them.
That's a great pattern too, by the way.
Yeah, this
It's really cool.
Yeah, the spreads are pretty cool. And in this, she's a rescue cat that this man has brought home with these, mesmerizing eyes. But in fact, she's something else, and you learn what she is once you read it. It's a little noirish. And in this is the Adam and Eve story. Familiar, she's teased and lured in to take an apple. But instead of a snake, it's the squirrel who's been luring her to this tree.
I hate squirrels too,
But they're fuzzy.
Yeah.
I guess. Kind of ratty.
A squirrel which person.
So they're sort of standalone stories, like when you're a child and you're reading a bedtime story, so you can enjoy each one as its own standalone thing. But then there's a little thread that runs through all of them, so they actually connect also.
Gotcha. And there's our parrot.
Yeah, and the parrot, the pet shop is the hub for a lot of these stories, because it's where animal owners shop. So, and he's the resident bird at the pet store, who's silent, who won't speak. But it turns out he does understand what everyone's saying.
So in a way, that's almost a case where that situation isn't on the animal's terms, being in a pet shop.
Correct.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Right, but he takes actions so that the animals come out on top after 20 years at the pet store.
Great. So great example of animals as animals, but how much you can read into what they must be thinking and what.
Oh, he thinks these people are idiots. They come up and they try to get him to talk, and
Yeah.
no, he's not going to talk. It's like the one power he's got. I'm not doing it.
And so similar, if we go to Karl's book, Penny, we've got an animal being an animal, except the big difference here is, we do have instances of deep internal thought and, in introspection. So, I guess, my question looking at some of these, and they are funny, is that what you really think your cat's thinking?
Yeah, she does have this, sort of sad personality, and she doesn't talk. She doesn't meow. So
Does not meow?
yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
she's very quiet, and
Huh.
she can be very affectionate, but the way that she looks too, it's just very serious. So, I guess, that's what that's why it came out as
Right.
being sort of, poor man's existentialism. So,
Is she an affectionate cat
yeah, she is.
with humans and you said you had a couple cats?
Yeah, well, we have her sister too. We got them
Oh, gotcha.
from the same litter. The one thing that she does do is drool. She does that disgusting paste drool. If you pet her a lot, and I really regret that I didn't put that in the book, because it's a prominent feature of her, and
You can have her sign the
more
books.
animal. I know, I should. I should be collecting it and put some dye in it, and then I'll draw the sequel in a, saliva, cats, her saliva. Or I should be signing the books that way, right? Yeah.
Just
Of
in
course.
person.
Yeah.
Slap.
No, I know. I wish I could bring her with me, but she's terrified of strangers.
John and Brandon, you guys also are common as far as you have animals in your stories, but it's almost anthropomorphic. It's more the animal almost in a human body, acting like a human, speaking. Julian's contemplates unemployment, there's smoking, there's, addiction. Do you think, you kind of touched on this earlier, do you think having a character like this makes it easier to talk about some of those, it gets a little dark in some places?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, like my animal characters are not animals. They're just people drawn like animals. Like they don't behave like animals in any context. And like, like, I mean, like I think he's a raccoon, I guess, because he's got the stripes. So like people ask me like, oh, what kind of animal is this supposed to be? And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's just shapes. It's just like circles and squares. But I think it does. Yeah, for me, it's just like, I don't know. It would be like a really different thing if it were human characters. It would be like so yeah, it is easier.
You think it would come across even darker?
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. Like the drawing like this, it makes it like easy to kind of modulate between like very silly and very serious and kind of like keep it all together. But like, I don't know, like, I mean, the stories aren't like auto-bio, but it's a lot of just like I take, stuff I remember and like stories I hear from people and my friends, and just it all like kind of goes into a blender and just like gets regurgitated in this other form.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is, it's a way of processing for sure. What exactly I'm processing is hard to say.
Gotcha.
But
And
yeah.
so I guess if I can ask, and you kind of touched on what the overall story arc is, kind of like a, close to home kind of storyline? Like, is this like, observations of friends and family and...
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I mean, in my early 20s, I definitely, made some mistakes. And I don't know, honestly, it started because of a story that a friend of mine told about his friend like ODing on OxyContin, and then they had to like just, they were like, we can't bring the cops in here, we have all these drugs, so they had to like drag the guy into the bathtub and like blast him with cold water, and they're just like slapping him in the face until he wakes up.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's a crazy story, I'm gonna put that in my comic. And that's how it started. And then, eventually like, ideas get sort of mutated and thrown out. But I don't know. I mean, with this, I don't know. Like I, got prescribed like pain medication for various things as a youngster, and maybe didn't use it entirely as directed. So this was a little bit of, kind of, I don't know, just thinking through that experience a little bit.
Sure. And I think to some degree, all us comic people are kind of guilty of that, basically working things through and putting it on paper, and ultimately it's a reflection.
Yeah, yeah. I
you're
mean,
going through.
hopefully, again, it goes enough through the like blender of fiction that it's not,
Sure.
the names and places have been
Right.
changed to protect the innocent kind of thing.
We're not journalists, let's be honest.
Yeah, definitely not.
It's the good stuff.
That feeling.
It's like the rare moment when you actually see that character smiling.
Yeah. I don't know. He
In
has
that
a good
place.
time for a while
Yeah.
until it kind of.
But that's like most drug addicts, right? The only time they're smiling is when they're doing drugs.
All right, Brandon. So, as far as, bringing animals to your world, universe really, for your books, same kind of thing. You got, animals are ahead, basically embodying kind of a, I think they have paws and things like that, so they're not totally human. But as far, the style is it's kind of like Blade Runner-esque to me, like it's trench coats and flying cars. It's very much that type thing. There's neon lights, and so it's got that feel. As far as like, do you think having characters be animals actually adds to that story? Is it fantastical in the same way? Does it maybe help the readers like?
I think it does add to the story. I think it adds like another level of surrealism or
Surrealism, yeah.
yeah, it just adds because the universe is already fantastical. So adding these characters that kind of look familiar but at the same time don't feel familiar, I think it just adds another layer to the story itself. So yeah, that's the, I guess you could call him the antagonist. So he's the detective bloodhound who's chasing Kat through the galaxy, and he's having a difficult time. But yeah, I think the character, like the shapes are really important to me. So I focus more on the shapes, and that's how the designs come about. It's not so much, I guess it's finding like compositions between the negative space and the inking.
Gotcha.
And so that a lot of that dictates the story as well. And so this is Kat, and he found this living spaceship that talks to him and wants to kind of probe him for information. So yeah, like I said, this is another, that's not an animal character, but it's not a human character either. It's a spaceship that's actually alive.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's cool.
yeah.
How are you drawing these?
Sorry?
How are you drawing them?
Oh, just technical pen on Bristol board.
Like a micron?
Microns, emoji pens, yeah, those are the main ones.
Oh, okay. And then are you scanning it in and then like adding the tone like digitally?
Yeah, adding the
Okay.
tone in Photoshop, yeah. And then kind of playing around with the tone after it's added with just different tools in Photoshop.
I see. That looks good.
You
Yeah,
got
so
a little
this-
bit of on cue Photoshop.
Yeah, so this is
Photos.
like the probing sequence.
It's when we get tricky. I don't think you like that.
Yeah, he's a little irritated on this page.
Very good. But yeah, I mean, you know, it definitely, I feel like it does enhance as far as, you know, forgetting and you're just kind of checking reality at the door and you're just kind of going with it. So
Yeah,
that's really
exactly.
cool.
It's
You know,
just-
same thing with like aliens, like, you know, nobody's actually seen like, you know, E.T. or anything like that, but it just kind of helps you transport to that.
Yeah, just let the
That part of your
universe, it kind of builds itself, honestly.
Yeah.
So.
So now, you know, and you had touched earlier on this, but so my comic is more kind of like a social justice kind of thing where I'm talking a lot about race and religion and inequalities and things like that. So for me to have characters that, you know, represent these kind of different groups comes with some baggage sometimes, you know, like for good or bad. So, I mean, I guess my question to you guys is, do you think animals also have that kind of preconceived notion where we touched on cute versus, you know, like a, you know, if it was Mickey Roach, would Disney be as successful, you know, if it was just a character like that? So, Karl, what do you think? I mean, do you think there's, you know, the fact that you have a cat, you're almost guessing that people are going to come into your book with a notion about that?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, but you know, a cat is a house pet, so you know, like half the people in the world have cats, the other half being dog people. So it's like one or the other, you know. So it's like a built-in audience, I guess. So, but I mean, as far like baggage as like for the species.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so as far as that goes, when it comes time to character selection, right? Like you have to tell a story. Do you start imagining like, okay, the police will be a rhino? Like you start almost characterizing these animals based on what you think they're like, what they would be like as a human or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, because like the history of, you know, anthropomorphizing certain animals,
Yeah.
you know, to be certain things. You know, I mean, I guess mouse is a good example
Sure.
of that, right? You know, the way he made Jews, rats, and Nazis, cats, and you know, the Poles were pigs.
Yeah, yeah.
The Americans were dogs.
Exactly.
You know, frogs for the French. So.
Brandon, what do you think?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah. Are you counting on people rooting for the cat hero?
yes and no. I'm big on like the complexities of characters.
Yeah.
So if people do root for Kat, that's great. But if people root for the Hound, that's great as well. Because it means that, I guess it means I've established some characters that have some complexities about them. They're not so black and white. You
Right.
can find something to like about them, even if they are the antagonist.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Maria, I know in your books, animals take more of a observed type role. Do you read into that at all? You're probably one of the, you know, of all the books, deal with animals that are outside the house.
Correct. And
Right.
but animals are always stay animals for us.
Yeah.
That might be the one difference. But it is interesting because like even like what you were saying, like Mickey Mouse, would have worked if it was Mickey Roach. But like mice are kind of creepy.
Yeah?
And like we
You know
all
where
love
you're at, right?
right, and we love Mickey Mouse. We love Ratatouille. Like we love these. It's kind of cool. Like animals allow you to suspend a lot of like bias or prejudice you might have toward one or the other. Like I don't love cats personally, like because I'm allergic, but I would love a cat story.
Yeah,
I treat them as two separate things, I think.
right.
All animals make good stories, I think.
Gotcha. So it's more hooking into the empathizing with them more so than specifically the kind
And
of...
allow you to like release yourself from like, this doesn't make sense or this isn't logical.
Right,
Because they're animals.
right. John, I mean, you know, you have a cat raccoon.
Yeah, I mean, I have a cat.
Yeah.
I love my cat. But yeah, I mean, like, I think what it is like, it's like mammals versus like other things. Like, you know, Mickey Mouse makes sense. Mickey Hamster would make sense. But like Mickey Roach would be weird because it's not a mammal. It's a little bit harder to relate to. Like almost all the characters in my comics are mammals. Like occasionally there'll be like a DuckTales inspired like duck in the background or something.
Yeah,
but yeah, I do feel like it's easier to relate to animals that are a little bit closer to us in the overall,
Gotcha.
you know, composition of the planet. So,
Wait,
fish.
Like, wasn't Mickey Roach a comic from the 70s?
Oh, I
like,
don't know.
Did
maybe
like Last
that's where it
Gaps
popped
put
into
that
my
out?
head.
Okay, I don't know. But there's someone in the
But if
audience
it was in the
that knows.
70s, the roach probably took on a different meaning.
Yeah.
Maybe, like Mickey Roach.
Yeah.
Like that's like, it's like ringing bells for me. You know, maybe I should do it.
So, I mean, I have a gazillion other questions, but I did want to give you guys a chance also to chime in and ask any of these guys, or all of them at the same time, any questions you may have. So, if you have a question, somebody must have one of them. Yes? Gonna make Dan work for it.
Yeah, the guy with the broken leg will bring you the microphone.
Hello. So going back to an earlier comment, which is essentially about whether or not your reader will pay attention if the character takes the film. Do you feel that your anthropomorphics, or focusing on animals and stories, is so that you can broach directly into those kinds of topics that may otherwise dissuade, or do you feel like maybe that was secondary and that was something you were just willing to explore because of the character you had?
Well, I mean, you know, like Penny is a vehicle for my my like dumb thoughts. So, I mean, I guess it like wouldn't work if it was me, you know, like doing like a Harvey Pekar style, like, you know, rant. I mean, I feel like, yeah, I mean, it goes back to the empathy thing, you know, like I don't think it would work, you know, if it was me. I think like the cuteness helps.
Yeah, I think for me, the stories in Cat in particular aren't so much dictated by the fact that the characters are anthropomorphic. It's just me wanting to design the characters that don't look human or don't look like things we see every day. So it's more so me designing these characters and then just putting them into situations, regardless of the fact that they're anthropomorphic.
This is it for me, but to take that and twist it, do you feel that making them non-human is allowing you to go into a headspace that is more creative, or towards the stories that we work on?
Actually, I think so. Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. I think if these were human characters, I would have more of a tendency to go along with tropes that have already been explored time and time again. But the fact that they're not human, it makes me think of more outlandish situations to put them in and characters for them to interact with. So yeah, definitely.
And it sounds like maybe even for the reader themselves to go into a different headspace.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say. because I think, like you asked earlier, if these were just human characters and it was a cat lurker and a detective, I think the audience will already have a preconceived notion of where this is going and what type of characters that they would meet along the way.
Right.
But when you see it's a cat and a dog, you don't really know what to expect now.
Yeah.
So that's fun for me.
Because the dog will be stopping at every hydrant, right?
Yeah.
And like chasing male people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's very much, he's easily distracted. So
Right.
It works for cat.
Animal stereotype.
Someday they'll end.
Do you guys have anything to add? I can go to the next question. Or I'll go to the next. Anybody else? Yeah, P hat.
It's the pirates dude.
No, it's orange. Sorry, I couldn't see the color.
Pirates guy.
Maybe it's prominent. I don't know.
That's hard. I have a question for Karl. Why did you choose Penny and not your other cat?
Not Pepper? Well, because my friend, it was supposed to be a 2-book deal. So Pepper was going to be the sequel. And then, because I had like the perfect opening, which is that it like opens with like Penny doing the same routine, and then like Pepper comes in, and she's like, "Who are you?" And she's like, "I'm Pepper. I've been here the whole time." And then Penny's like, "I never noticed you." So that's the opening.
It's a lot of pressure on Penny.
So, yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I have like the first like 30 pages, so, but you know, that's a longer story.
So yeah, I mean, kind of on that, real quick, if we have just a couple minutes, if we can just kind of run down you guys, tell us what you're currently working on, anything that we can find at your tables that we should go check out. You know, it can be what we talked about or anything coming up in the future. John, if you want to start off.
Sure, yeah. I don't have anything new at my table. My projects are usually really long books and take a while, but yeah, on Instagram, I've been serializing another like really long story in the same universe. Some overlap with the characters and stuff. It's like 520 pages now, and I think it'll be like 700. And yeah, I mean, like going back to the thing of like, does it allow you to, you know, kind of like be like more imaginative? Like the current thing is like a weird kind of sci-fi, like office hybrid thing. So yeah, yeah, nothing. I mean, I have books on my table, but yeah, check out the Instagram, and yeah, this
Plug it.
long project in the works.
Very cool. Maria?
So yeah, Animal Stories came out this spring, and then we had a second graphic novel called The Bend of Luck that came out in August, which is also full length, but it's a cool story. This guy is mining for gold in California in the 1860s. Instead of gold, he finds luck, which is actually takes on a physical form. And once you have luck, this object, you can't lose it, and it's both good and bad. So it's his tale, and in fact, he then passes it on to his son. So it's this multi-generational story about luck.
Wow. Brendan?
So I have all 3 issues of Cat at my table currently. I'm finishing the 4th issue now, where the Hound interrogates some people, and
People?
well, correction.
Excuse me?
Interrogates some other cats violently, and then Cat is chased by some space rats because he avoids an intergalactic toll. So
That's cool.
That's what happens.
yeah.
Karl?
Penny came out in May, and it is currently unavailable to buy until January, unless you go see David Sedaris on tour, because my publisher, even though it had 4 months to plan for a reprint, did not.
But you're not bitter.
I'm not bitter. But I'm currently working on this crazy horror comic called Mother Nature that was written by Jamie Lee Curtis, who was an actress. She bought one of my New Yorker cartoons, and turns out she wanted to be friends. I don't know why. Oh, I know why. And so she like sent me this script, and I said it would make a great graphic novel. And then 9 months later, of like agents fighting, I'm doing it, and I'm like on page 140 of 160. So it'll be out next year at the San Diego Comic-Con,
Yeah.
and so it'll be my big mainstream coming out party. I'm very excited to be rich and famous.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I want to thank panelists. Thank you guys for coming.